Yeah, so we're working our way through, actually, two books simultaneously, the Book of Equanimity and the Blue Cliff Record. A lot of them have the same koans in them, so we're working through them as they because some of as the same koan is in both or all three books, we just cover the koan from all three books. But primarily it's the Book of Equanimity. So today's case 13, Rinzai's Blind Donkey. Preface to the assembly. Devoted entirely to others, oneself is unknown. Straightaway eliminating dharmas, you shouldn't be bothered by there being no one. Mean treatment, like breaking a wooden pillow, should be used. What about when it's time to depart? Main case. Attention. When Rinzai was about to pass away, he charged Sancho, after I depart, do not let my true dharma eye be extinguished. Sancho said, how could I let your true dharma eye be extinguished? Rinzai countered, if someone suddenly asks you about it, how will you reply? Sancho gave a shout, and Rinzai remarked, who would have thought that my true dharma eye would be extinguished on reaching this blind donkey? Appreciatory verse. At midnight, the robe of faiths transmitted to know of Ro, 700 upset monks on Yellow Plum Mountain. The true dharma eye of Rinzai's limb, the blind ass extinguished it, and people despised him. Mind and mind together sealed. Ancestor to ancestor transmitting the lamp. Seas and mountains being leveled. A giant fish becomes a phoenix. It's just that such splendid words are hard to compare with any time as a device he can metamorphose. So, we've talked about Rinzai before, and he was one of the more violent Zen teachers. His primary tool was shout, but there was, one time when, he was giving a talk on the man of no rank, and his monk asked him, well, where do I find this man of no rank? So Rinzai stepped down, took him by the lapels and shook him so that he realized that he's the man of no rank. So there was this very confrontational aspect of Rinzai that you have. That is really quite the style, if you will, of the Rinzai school. The Rinzai school was, when it got to Japan, it became the Zen of the samurai. So the warriors had this very hardcore way of studying Zen, and there's nothing slow in the Rinzai school. So we're a hybrid because my Zenryoshi had transmission for both Rinzai and Soto, so we have a combination of both. So in the Soto school, they only do, like our Kenhin as an example, our walking meditation. In a strict Soto school, they only do slow Kenhin. In the strict Rinzai school, they only do fast Kenhin, meaning they get up from Zazen and into a trot immediately. And that is not easy to do when your feet are asleep. So, and I've sat with a couple of Rinzai groups that did that, and they were rather adamant about, getting everybody up to pace immediately. And you did not, unlike, when we have a call for either Daisan or Dokusan, people very politely get up, gather their cushions, and go wait in line and wait for the bell to ring for them to go into Dokusan and Daisan. In the Rinzai school, you got up and you ran, and the intent was you are to be the first in line to see the Roshi. So, really, really quite a much more energetic, if you will, energetic, dynamic, confrontational school of practice. But it worked. I mean, it's the only two schools of Zen. There are three schools that have survived out of what were like 12, if I remember the original count, through history. So the Vipassana, the Soto, and the Rinzai schools are the only three left. And here we are. And I guess I consider Soto to be like Goldilocks. It's in the middle. It's not too Vipassana's too soft, and Rinzai's too hard, and Soto's somewhere in that cushy middle. And then with our school, with our tradition, we combine certain elements of the Rinzai school, but not all of them. So this is Rinzai's death. He's passing on his torch to Sanshou, his successor, and telling him, don't let my tradition, my school, my teachings die out. This true Dharma I. But what is this true Dharma I that he's passing on? What is Dharma? If you look it up in the dictionary, it's a page and a half of definitions, because it's a very old word. Ultimately, it comes down to the way we use it today is that Dharma is reality, just as it is. Not as we want it to be, not as we think it should be, but just as it is. Just the direct experience of the true reality. But how can that be extinguished? I mean, true reality has been here around for billions of years. And it will continue, whether or not this tradition continues or not. Reality will always be reality. But will we have, did we have, always in history, the training to actually be present in reality just as it is? Because that's hard. Because the human beings evolved to only see what we need to survive. We don't see reality just as it is. We can't see atoms and electrons and protons and all of the stuff that make up reality. The fact that we perceive reality, we perceive things as solid. If I throw this at you, you think that it hits you. But according to the physicists, it never touches you. Right? Those of you who've studied physics. But we can't see that. That's not how we perceive reality. So, what is this reality that Rinzai is instructing Sanshou not to extinguish? Certainly it's something that can't be extinguished. So is it just the style of the teaching? Is it just the shout of Rinzai? And what is Rinzai really saying? Who would have thought that my true Dharma I would be extinguished on reaching this blind donkey? So, blind donkey, that doesn't sound like it's a compliment. But from a Zen point of view, we all chanted the Heart Sutra this morning. We talked about no ears, no eyes, no tongue, no mouth. What is that no? What is that not seeing, not relying? And it's really this. The only thing it's pointing to is the fact that your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and mind don't operate separately. They are all part of a whole experience, all part, and only happen, and only perceive within the context of reality. So, indeed, when you are truly enmeshed in reality, you're not aware of, you're not thinking about, oh, my ears are hearing this, or my nose is smelling this, or my tongue is tasting this. You're just experiencing the tasting, hearing, smelling, all of the senses without separating those things into distinctions. You're just experiencing it as a whole, without all the story that goes along with it. Because this experience, this direct experience of reality, happens before it becomes words for the story. But it takes time for us to, deconstruct these beliefs about reality, because we think that reality is what we think reality is, or what we say reality is, but reality happens before it becomes thought and before it becomes words. So how do we get to that true experience? And oftentimes, it is being confronted with it. In Rinzai's school, it was like, he got you to the experience of that reality by a little bit of, shock therapy, if you will. If you ask me a question. Yeah, the shouting tool is like, you ask a stupid question, and his response is going to be, ha! And it's like, what was that? And it comes up as a question because it happened before you had a chance to really make it into something. And then, of course, you have a reaction to it. You either think, oh, that was great, or what the hell? How really rude. Then it becomes a story about what you just experienced. So how do you extricate yourself from those stories to what happens before the stories? And that's what the sitting is all about. That's what Zazen. That's the work of doing this. This is why we do this. And very few people. This doesn't have a lot of appeal to thousands of people. There are a lot of people who do practice, but there's still a minority. Most people want the stories, and the religions, and myths, and all those things. They're wonderful stories, and they have their place. But are they reality? And that's really what this school, what this practice is all about. So, Rinzai's instruction not to extinguish reality. So he's giving, like many of the things in Zen, like our four vows. Our four vows are impossible to actually accomplish. Save all sentient beings. However, if indeed you, as a sentient being, are connected to all other sentient beings, if you're saving yourself, you have saved all sentient beings. In that sense. And if indeed reality can't be extinguished, though, so his telling his students, his successor, not to extinguish reality, well, it's not something they can do anyway. So, but that's only part of what he's saying. So reality can't be extinguished, but certainly the direct experience of reality can so easily get diluted, and that's that delusion that we want, that this school, that Zen, practice of Zen, is set up to pass on, to continue. That's why it's this direct experience and this mind-to-mind transmission from one teacher to student. That student becomes the teacher, and that teacher passes it on. So it's a direct experience to direct experience to direct experience to direct experience, and not just this, tacit approval of someone who's passed all the koans. Because passing the koans is easy enough. Dealing with reality as it is and demonstrating that you can deal with reality just is really the job of the teacher, to watch and see how someone actually functions with all of that. So,
this whole discussion about not letting my true dharma I be distinguished reminds me of the heroes and halos thing that happens to people when they die, and we make them into something, and we strip away the essence, what they really were, because we need a story about them that we can live with. So we create their heroes, their halos, whatever it is. I saw that happen, with Cesar Chavez, that, when he died, it just, people forgot that he really fought about. He was really a fighter, and he wasn't necessarily a very nice fighter. He was a street fighter, basically. Yeah. But all that got lost in, And he turned into this service provider, this model of serving humankind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what he did that, but that was just such a small portion.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we do that all the time with people that, are significant and have significant lives, and we cover them over like the dharma. We made a story about it. We mask it.
Yeah, and we venerate these old teachers as meaning something, but they're dead and gone, and the teaching only lives in us, right here, right now. This is the only place where reality is. It is not in the stories we tell about these old masters. Yes, these stories are very nice, and it's nice to remember and honor these people, but if that's all we're doing, if that's where we're stuck, then that's the problem. And I know from firsthand experience, a great nephew of Cesar Chavez was a union rep at Kaiser. And he carried on his very confrontational tradition, as a union rep with me, because he and I came to very direct blows at times. But I appreciated it.
That's a living legacy.
Yeah, a living legacy of a very hard one, a very hard fought tradition, of taking care of the people. He and I had, a lot of his stuff was somewhat performative because it was in front of the members. He and I could have a calm discussion and come to some compromise position behind closed doors. But when he was in front of, his members, HR was the devil, and his members were there as the people who were, serving Kaiser. Say what? Yeah, very much so. So anyway, I appreciate, because there are times when that very forceful, confrontational style works. Even when you're dealing with stuff yourself, you have to sometimes strip away all of the excuses and just really face reality as it is. I find myself doing that now because I look at my family, and the thing that both my grandfather and my mother did with their Alzheimer's was hide. And so I'm making myself very likely this will run in the family. And when it comes time for me to deal with this, I want to be able to face it, really confront this and deal with it as it is, because it is a reality, as it is. So so it has its place. Not that it's always the most effective way, but it is one of the possible effective tools. And I'm appreciating both verses for this, the preface and the appreciatory verse. Really point out that, and it points to what you just said. The blind ass extinguished it, and people despised him. So, because the other thing because students do not become like their teachers. Because if you're, as a Zen student, you are yourself. You bring yourself and your context and your history and what you've come through to the teaching. And as you become a Zen teacher, that's what carries on. So in a sense, you do extinguish what your teacher taught, because you're not your teacher. You don't teach the same way or the same thing in the same style. So the teacher does get, I prefer the word transcended, because you do learn from the teacher and you do carry that forward, but you are still yourself. You are still bringing yourself to the practice. So in that sense, the teacher does get extinguished in that sense. And the teachings get carried on. And very much that's what happened with Maizumi Roshi. There were some people who hated him, who he died being despised by being some people, and also being venerated. So And we have many wonderful stories and books and all kinds of things about Meiji University, but he made some mistakes. But that's for me, that makes him human, and that is what I would prefer is what about our humanity works and what about our humanity does not work, and we learn from both. And so those are important lessons to learn, I think. So being the blind ass, and in this sense, being I think you could easily translate it as a dumbass, as someone who just doesn't deal with stories or the intellectual aspects of Zen, which is really what he's pointing to, is calling him a blind ass, because intellectual stories don't help a donkey very much. A donkey just needs to be a donkey and do what a donkey does, and that's what is really he's pointing to. So it's considered to be a high compliment from Rinzai to call Sancho a blind donkey in this case. And hopefully Sancho took it that way. I don't know.
Probably shouldn't try that in today's world.
Yeah, I don't think that. You have to do what will be effective.
But it says in the book.
Yeah. So ancestor to ancestor, transmitting the lamp. The transmitting the lamp is the name of there's a series of koans from Rinzai. That's the name of that book. It's a 9-volume series of koans that are sitting on my shelf waiting for me to read and actually dive into. But I love this last line. It's just that such splendid words are hard to compare with. Anytime as a device, he can metamorphose. So being able to change, to be what is necessary in the moment, is really what this teaching does. You strip away everything that you're stuck in, your personality, your identity, all those things that give you whatever you think is your context for who you think you are. It has no meaning. It is just what you're making up. But what that gives you, what's left, is this absolute freedom to be whatever it is you need to be in whatever situation is right there in front of you, and to take care of that situation in the most effective way possible. To be able to instantly metamorphose into what is the best that can be in that moment is the ultimate freedom of this practice. Hard work, continuous hard work to be able to do that, because the ego does not go easily. It keeps, and it as a tool, which is what he's talking about, any time as a device, as a tool, the ego can work very effectively as well. But you get your full selection of ego, of how you want that ego to manifest, what will work in that particular moment. And if being rid of that ego is what will work, you can easily step out of that as well. But it takes practice. It takes a lot of really hard looking into and really learning to experience reality before it becomes a perception, a thought, and then last after all that, it turns into words and a story. And the stories, point to reality, but they're not reality in itself. So what is that direct experience of reality itself without these filters of words and stories and perceptions? Getting to that is what this work is, and what koans are set up to do, to help with the deconstruction of those ideas and stories.
I have a question with the last line of the koan.
Mm-hmm.
It's something like, who would have thought that my true dharma would be extinguished by this blind dharma? How come it says would be extinguished rather than would not be extinguished?
Because Rinzai understood that he was being extinguished. He's dying.
Oh, he's literally being extinguished.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Just as all of us, will be extinguished.
Yes.
There's no getting out of this alive. we live this life and we die. So who would have thought that my true dharma I, so certainly what Rinzai was, lived and died, and the teaching went on. So in that sense, Rinzai is being extinguished. What he taught, and reality cannot be extinguished. And even to if you want to take it to a quantum level, or Newtonian level, matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It changes form. So he just changed form. In that sense, you could look at that as being immortal in some way. But this blind donkey is who he is entrusting to carry on his teaching, and to do it without him, because he's gone. At this point, he's going to be gone. But he knows his time is over. His teaching is ended. Someone else has to carry that on. And Sancho was a very different teacher than Rinzai was. As we all are, different from our predecessors, different from our ancestors, different from those who will come after us. And that's an important thing to acknowledge and to let go, and to be willing to let that go. That, people build legacies and get very upset with their children for not being willing to carry on their legacy. But that child, that son, that daughter, everybody has their own life, has their own expression, their own experience of what reality is. That's what gets carried on, is the methodology, if you will, of getting to that reality. Each of us, as we get to that reality, experience it as each of us experiences it, and it's not the same experience as everyone else. It is unique in that sense. So and it does take stripping away all of the ideas and all the intellectual understandings that we think make us important, to really get to that experience, to get to being a blind donkey, which is the best thing to be.
I'm reminded of the Buddha's admonition to not write anything down.
Yeah. Which became a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He was against it. Yeah, writing anything. Anytime anybody tried to write down what he was saying, he would tell them to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And they didn't. Most of so basically the writings, what we have is Ananda, who had perfect recall, he recalled even lectures given or teachings given by the Dharma at which he was not present. Ananda could remember them, so the myth says. So that's how we have what we have, because it wasn't written down when he was alive. It was written down many years later. And much of what was practiced didn't get written down at the time. So we're talking about things being, removed and recalled 100 to 500 years.
Just telling stories. It became because he said that, then it turned into a story, and then got rewritten, and kind of a game of Dharma telephone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and every so often people try to clean it up. To get back to what they thought was the true, could we ever get there? Not unless you were there, unless you were alive at the time of the Buddha and heard what the Buddha actually said, there's no true experience of that. And all we have is, what we have. And so we do the best we can with what we have, and what we have is written some years, post his death. But reality is still reality, and getting to experience that reality it doesn't matter because according to Buddhist tradition, he was the seventh Buddha. The six preceding Buddhas were kalpas and kalpas and kalpas before, and a kalpa is a very long time, and so we're talking about billions and billions of years in that mythology. And so every few billion years we need a new Buddha, according to tradition. And that's Maitreya, that's the Buddha yet to come. But these are all metaphorical. We are the living Buddhas, because the Buddha made it very clear. All beings, no exception. There's not all beings except Trump. It's all beings have the wisdom of the Tathagata. And so we have that job of being the Buddha, of being the enlightened one, of being the awakened ones. And we are the living treasure, living eye, the true Dharma treasure of this teaching. And we are the future come Buddha. We are Maitreya. And we are all the Bodhisattvas, because they're all archetypes, and they're all part of who we are, whether it be wisdom or compassion or all of those things that are attributed to those Bodhisattvas. We are those, which is why we chant the 4 Bodhisattva vows at the end, because that's our job. We've taken that on. We've taken on the work of experiencing reality and dealing with reality and taking care of reality just as it is, not as we want, not as we think it should be, just as it is. And that's the vow we make. This is the work we do. Sitting on the cushion. So if you thought this was going to be bliss and repose. Rinzai died very young. He was only 51, and so was Dogen. I mean, they both died in their early 50s. They're probably the most prolific teachers, Rinzai and Dogen. Rinzai for the Rinzai school, Dogen later in Japan for the Soto school. Barely made it into their 50s, but left a legacy that's just amazing. And they wrote a lot because no one adhered to that rule about not writing things down. Well, some of them did. So I can't remember who was the teacher. There was one teacher who didn't want anything written down, but one of his monks either had it depends on which part of the story you read. Either he had paper inside his kesa in which he took notes, or he had a paper kesa that he wrote. So he would have had, I mean, if he's writing all these notes during all the talks, because this guy taught for 40 years, he must have had a different kesa every day. So I think he had something inside his kesa, because the kesas, kind of drape over your arm, and so you could easily secretly write notes. And that's the only reason we have, I can't even remember which teacher that is, that's the only reason we have those teachers, that teacher's talks, was that somebody wrote them down. So people didn't listen to those admonitions, because I get it, because the words are always after the fact. They become a story, and they become a distraction from what reality is. However, in order to have something to hang on to continue this teaching, because for some reason we need the stories, we need the forums, we need something to help us get to knowing that doesn't help us. So we do this striving, we do all this work, we do all this sitting to really understand that we don't need any of it, but it works. The stories work, the sitting works, the forms work. So it's this bizarre kind of ambiguity that we hold with this teaching. Because the ones who didn't write things down or who didn't carry on sort of forms, those schools died out, and they're no longer there. So in order to have something to pass on, we pass on what we say is not real. Sorry. So, but we hopefully we tell the truth about that. Yeah, these stories are not real. I mean, these koans are not real, but they help get you to hopefully experience reality just as it is, as you embody what these great masters taught us. So there's value in there, but it's not going to do the work for you. It doesn't, reading this doesn't make you enlightened. You still have to do the work. That's the downside, or the upside, whichever way you want it, depending on which story you want to tell about it. Some people have actually, ran into an old practitioner not too long ago who said, Zen just doesn't work. Okay. For that person, it didn't work. So we have a variety of other practices and religions that hopefully will work for that person, but do what works for you, and if this isn't it, then find something that does. And even within this, if you need a story, pick a story that works, because you're free to make up any story. But find one that helps you, really deal with reality effectively, hopefully compassionately and inclusively, because all this attempt to separate us, do we not have enough history to show that doesn't work? I think we do. But questions, comments, Sandra, Kirk? No? Got the focus on this camera. It's not very good, but work in progress.
No technological problems to it.
I know, pretty good. Sound worked, and it stayed on, so that's a plus. All right. Anything else? Any other questions about this? Oh, it's very simple. This was, again, I forgot to, this is only in this book, this particular koan. I think we have, I think the next one is only in this book as well. I have to get that. I'm still trying to clean up that list. I think I figured it out, because I think whoever compiled that list, he's got 3 columns, and the first column is, the koan that book is in. If that particular koan is in other books, he has the 2 other columns. But that first column is not in any order. It's just bizarre. So I always have to go through the entire list, because it's not in numerical order, and find the particular koan that I'm going to talk about and see if it has any other books that it also appears in.
Well, if you give me your rough stuff, I can give it to my secretary. If you go in with this book and just put it in order.
Okay. But I suppose it could be ordered by book.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that the other columns match it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you order by a book like Equanimity, and then just put the other ones that fit in really with that.
I'm sure somebody has already done that in the last 500 years.
And I have that list.
Problem.
But the way he did it is awkward. It's just not. It's not the most useful way of doing that list. For him, it probably worked, because he made the list for himself, not for me. But so I'm just having to get used to it. But I'll show it to you and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, we can do it.
Okay. All right. Any final questions before we close today? Here's my message for the day. Now I have to, because there are 3 different routes I can take to get here. There's only one route on which I see that billboard.
Oh.
So I keep warning. I wonder if it changes weekly, because it was a different message last week. But they're kind of nice messages.
What's your message today?
That's what I just had. And it was on a piece of paper. It's gotta be here somewhere. That one. I lost it just that quickly. because it was marking my page, and now it's not.
You weren't supposed to write it down.
Oh, yeah, exactly. My mistake. I turned it into a story. All right. Let's close today.